All right, this is Tom Salemi. We're here at OIS at ASRS. I'm happy to be joined by Dr. Firas Rahhal, a partner at ExSight, which is an impact investing group, and you were on our seed stage panel. And I wanted to learn more about ExSight. But first, tell me about yourself. How did you find your way into ophthalmology?
So I've been an ophthalmologist since finishing residency in 1994 and then fellowship for vitreoretinal surgery in 1996. And I think it was probably early in medical school that I decided on ophthalmology. There were a number of reasons. I like high-tech surgery, and ophthalmology has plenty of that. And some of the other high-tech surgical specialties, the microsurgery done in neurosurgery, was very attractive, and I like that too. But the lifestyle was kind of difficult in neurosurgery. So between a couple of the surgical specialties, I tended towards ophthalmology for a number of reasons. And then once I was a resident, I thought vitreoretinal was the most challenging and the most exciting, and this has turned out to be true now, 20-some years later, the one that had the greatest horizon for improved patient care. There was a vast array of diseases that were still untreatable, but we were getting close. So I went into retina based on that once I was already an ophthalmology resident.
I guess it's worked out. I guess you made a good decision.
Thank you.
So you have a busy practice in LA, and yet you decided you need more to do.
Yeah, I don't know that I decided more than I was recruited, but we have a busy practice, yes. It's called Retina Vitreous Associates. I've been there for about 15 years, which is 2/3 of my career thus far, and I plan to stay there forever. It's a great group of retina surgeons, in my opinion, one of the best, and I think people like our group, and we are very heavily involved in clinical trials. So some of the genesis of what is coming about in this stage in my career is that we are a high participant in clinical trials. Our group, particularly our lead senior physician, Dr. Boyer, who was on the panels here today, helped to design clinical trials. We're involved on that end a lot, and I've actually liked that. And I started to see what goes on behind the scenes in the industry commercial side of developing treatments through the clinical trials. And to get to your original question, did I need something more to do? Definitely my wife would say no. I would say maybe. I'm kind of a high energy person. That's what my friends would say. But I was pitched this idea of ExSight, what at the time called ExSight Capital, now we're called ExSight Ventures, by my friend and great colleague, Michael Nissen, who's a retina surgeon in New York City. And he and a couple of his patients who were in the business world on Wall Street, venture capitalists themselves, at least that's how I would describe them. They might give a different financial term for it. Both of which had significant eye problems that he had known about. And through discussions between the three of them, the genesis was it would be a do-gooder impact VC, not one that you would refer to as a vulture capital, like that some euphemisms have come about, but to try to do some good. And Michael was generous enough to call me, and he flew out to LA actually to meet with me, to invite me to be a founding partner with him in the firm. And it took a lot of thought about time to decide to do it, and I made the commitment to do it after having a lengthy discussion and thinking about it for a couple of weeks with my wife, because I knew there would be more time away potentially, but it hasn't really panned out that way. Mostly I work out of LA.
Well, there's always the suggestion that there are physicians that leave practice to join industry because they say one of the reasons is that they feel like they can help more patients that way by developing a therapeutic that helps thousands as opposed to treats hundreds. Do you get that sort of sense from ExSight? And let's talk about what ExSight is. It's ExSight Ventures. It's obviously an investment firm. Yeah. But how is it structured? Is it a venture capital
It's a
fund?
venture capital firm, and there's 7 of us who are members. And we raise money from investors. We can talk about who they are if you would like to.
Sure, let's get into that.
The investors thus far in the fund, we've had one fund that we're operating right now under management, and the spectrum of investors have been ophthalmologists, make up a substantial percentage of the investors, and high net worth individuals. some of which just like the investment idea of an impact investment that is to help and to return on investment, hopefully, but to also help society. And then some who are high net worth who invested, I think, specifically because of their connection to ophthalmology based on their own personal history of eye disease or a family member who has eye disease. And so those folks, usually we are going through and pitching the idea to their money manager, so-called family office. And I would say between those three groups is the majority of the funds we raised. Our own money also is in the VC fund, and we're in the process of deploying it. We've made a few investments already, and we feel really good about them. Our first investment did well, and we had an exit. And we plan towards the end of this year to go out and raise our next fund, which we will hope to be larger and be more impactful, actually, to be able to potentially invest into later rounds where larger capital is required.
How large is this first fund?
About $3 million under management right now from the first fund. So it's small by comparison to some of the folks you'll see here. But it's what I have found, and this has all been new to me since 2014, honestly. What I found is you can do a lot with that amount of money, a lot. If you're really selective and do the diligence at a high level on where to put the money, where to deploy it, you can have a high success rate, both for your investors on a financial side and for the ophthalmic community on a development of good product side. And I think we've seen that already, and we're starting to see it more with some of our more recent investments. And our original goal was to raise more, but and I'll be honest completely with you, all cards on the table, it was very difficult because to get to, say, the next level, to raise, say, $25 to $50 million for a venture fund, you need to speak to and pitch to institutional investors. And they're great. We did. And we received a lot of excellent responses and positive feedback. But truthfully, it would often end with, we just can't do it with a company that has no track record. They have their jobs on the line too, and they're investing for a big, huge bank. And they need to be able to justify. So our plan would be, now that we have developed a track record, and I think a very good one, that on our next fund, we would like to try to bring in some institutional investors who can bring the larger amounts of capital to bear for us. And that's our hope within the next 6 to 12 months.
And how are you sourcing and reviewing deals?
Deal sourcing has not been difficult, getting the deals to come to us. And I would say the first answer is probably one of the reasons that I was brought into this, maybe inadvertently. I think I was brought into this based on a personal relationship with Dr. Nissen, who I admittedly it was his brainchild with his two patients with one patient who are partners now in this firm. I think what I have brought myself, principally, at least in the early stages, was because of my clinical trials experience around the country. It turns out I have a ton of contacts in this. I didn't really realize it. They're friends, and you associate, and you see them at meetings and shoot the breeze. And it turns out there are a lot of people that I have come in contact with over my career on a positive, friendly basis, sometimes working together, sometimes just collegiality, who are the innovators in our field, and they've received us very well, not just because of the personal relationship, that's part of it, but also the group itself is not, again, this kind of vulture capital. A lot of times the innovators and the entrepreneurs are resistant to bringing venture capital in, especially early on, because they don't want them to, so to speak, take over the project and then move away from what the entrepreneur wanted in the first place. And that does happen, and sometimes it's for good reason. Because of our connection to ophthalmology and the fact that I'm still a full-time vitreoretinal surgeon and attend all the meetings and coordinate with these guys on clinical projects and trials, I think there's a trust factor. And so the deals have been coming, to come back to your answer, they've been coming fairly freely through all of us, but I've been able to see a number just through personal contacts in the eye business.
And how are you reviewing those deals?
That's a complicated answer, and I definitely rely immensely on the investment professionals and lawyers in the group. Obviously, as a physician, I have a certain skill set and definitely don't have a skill set that they have. But between us, the process is basically nuts and bolts. We'll ask the entrepreneur or innovator to send us a slide deck. They'll usually contact us in one way or another. We usually get contacted by someone who says, hey, I have this idea, or I have a friend who would like to pitch you guys this idea. Sure. We'll ask them for a slide deck. We'll review it very carefully, first initially on the science, on the merits of the actual idea. And then we'll usually do some background research in that area if it's not one that, say, falls into mine or Dr. Nissen's expertise. If it's not in the retina or the vitreous, if it's, say, glaucoma or cornea, we will go and do our legwork to learn more about those areas, because we're not practicing in those areas, but we're both trained ophthalmologists. And then we might, for the science aspect, then consult with some of our friends who are either advisors or just curbside. And at the same time, then our financial folks are breaking down where the company is in their financial status, what their plan looks like financially, what stage they're in financially, what their needs might be, and how that fits with our investment profile. And once we get a little bit of all that put together and meet together a few times maybe, then we would have, or once, we would have a call with the group to sort out their needs and wishes more directly and develop some personal relationship. And usually it goes from there. There may be several calls then after that.
Sure.
And then either the diligence results in us saying, this is awesome, we got to move forward, or it may not be the right fit for us.
This may be hard to know, but do you think you look at deals differently than venture firms that aren't led by ophthalmologists?
Yes, I think we do. It is hard to know because I have the experience of one.
Exactly.
And so I appreciate your asking me, and I would say yes, I do think so, and I'll take devices as an example. We didn't have a chance to talk about this on the panel, but it was something that I think about with devices all the time. So with drugs, there's efficacy and safety, and you prove it, and kind of anyone even associated with biotech can understand that. But devices, and drugs too, to some extent, but with devices, understanding how ophthalmology clinic flows work, especially if you're in a high volume situation like myself and our group and Michael, knowing how the OR works, knowing the flow, knowing the financial parameters, and owning your own large medical practice and what the parameters are that lead you to use a product or not use a product is a real advantage that's very hard to teach someone or just get from a consultant. It's very difficult because there's subtleties there. And the example is if you're buying a big device and it's very expensive, knowing what acquisition fee equates to what reimbursement schedule equates to being profitable and useful, and then knowing where it fits into the cycle of how the patient cycles through the clinic or through the OR, and is this really going to be an efficient, usable device, marketable device, even if it's proven efficacious and safe, will it be usable to a real ophthalmologist in real time? So long story short, yes, I think there's a little advantage to being an active participant in clinical practice. I'm an owner in a fairly large practice with many doctors, and although it's just posterior segment, not all of ophthalmology, we run similarly to what a general ophthalmology practice might run.
And you spoke of your track record. What successes have you had? You've had at least one exit, right?
One exit. With our first investment was a successful exit. It was called RetroSense Therapeutics. I saw them on a slide here today in the slide that showed the various exits that were positive, and we actually
felt good.
That felt really good.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was a small investment. relatively speaking. But it felt good to all of us. Honestly, you can take this as, I mean this sincerely, it felt good to validate our process, much more so than the actual financial reward, which obviously there was some. But I could tell from talking to all my partners initially and even for a while after that the real joy in it was it validated what we knew to be, or what we felt to be, a good process, a good, thoughtful, deliberate diligence process, which we do kind of slowly and long. And it panned out on our first one, and we received a lot of positive feedback on that from the community at large. And I think that's one of the reasons I was asked to be part of the panel today. So I'm very appreciative. And we have 3 other deployed investments out of this fund now, 2 of which are public information, and I could talk about if you'd like to, but we feel pretty strong about those as well. But they're not at exit stage yet.
Sure. What are the 2?
So one is a lens implant, an accommodating lens. For the viewers who don't do cataract surgery, accommodating meaning the lens will alter its shape to adjust for far and near, as opposed to, say, a multifocal lens, which has the focality already into the lens single shape with the concentric rings, let's say, like an eyeglass lens that's multifocal. Accommodation is the actual mimicking of the human lens that adjusts and shifts its thickness and size to focus far, near, or intermediate. And a camera sort of does this. The eye does it automatically. That company is called LensGen, and we feel very strongly about that company. And they recently had some excellent news, and so we feel good about that. And the other one that I can speak about freely here is Trefoil. It was mentioned on the podium today when we did our panel, because Hatteras, the company that was also on the panel with us, were investors in that, and that's a corneal treatment company. They're figuring out ways, or have figured out ways, to improve the health of endothelial cells, maybe even repopulate the endothelial cells. That would be a great goal, and it is the goal, to treat Fuchs dystrophy and some other corneal diseases. And we're pretty excited about that one too.
Terrific. And final question, what is the most challenging part of running this firm? What gives you the most trouble?
2 things. I'll speak for the firm first, and then for me individually.
Sure.
For the firm, I think since it's a first-time firm, and it's pretty hard to organically, I've learned, build an investment firm out of nothing and go to someone who handles large amounts of money and say, give us your money so that we can invest it for you. That's a hard thing to ask. And we're good at asking, and I think the challenge of raising large amounts of money for a small new firm is a difficult one, but we're starting to get past that now with some of our successes, and that has helped. And then for me personally, although it's been a lot of fun, and I love it, I have to make the time because I do run a full-time practice, which would be considered a very busy practice, even within my own network of specialists. So finding the time to do the work, and I have been able to do that so far, and I think we're getting so streamlined that now it's gotten easier to fit it in with the other duties that I have.
Great. Well, good luck with investing whatever is left in this fund, and best of luck with the second fund if you decide to go forward with it.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate you inviting me to do the podcast and to be on the panel. Thanks a lot. I've been watching your podcasts, or listening to them. As I told you in the email, they're excellent. Really, they're really good.
Appreciate that. Thanks
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks.